So we're just gonna ask you like a few questions about like your job and your experience and the population you work with, and then just like general questions about assistive technology. So can you just give us some background about your experience as an OT and how you found yourself working in assistive technology?
Sure. So when I first graduated from OT school, I worked first. I always wanted to work in pediatrics, but jobs were not plentiful when I first started, particularly in pediatrics in schools. So I worked skilled nursing, long-term subacute care units, outpatient, ortho neuro rehab, a little bit of everything. So I worked for a locally owned at that time, now transitioning over, therapy center that had their own outpatient therapy center and then contracted with other agencies like the skilled nursing and did some home health. And so a little bit of everything, like a lot of OTs have done, but always had a real passion for pediatrics. So I started finding some other contracting jobs on the side that got my foot in the door with peds in some way. So that was some charter schools that just needed like an OT for a day or a day and a half a week, covering some maternity leaves for some therapy staff and things like that. And that's really where I got introduced to assistive tech. So, and actually before that, probably to back up, when I was in college, I worked as a home health aide while I was in school getting my bachelor's, and I worked as a home health aide for a gentleman who had C4 spare quadriplegia, a spinal cord injury, and so Mike introduced me to lots of assistive technology, a lot that he had kind of designed and crafted himself. So that was kind of my first, like, and then of course, as we got like the one AT class in OT school that got like a flash of lots of different opportunities, but I really got to see it in action when he was with some of the stuff he would use. So that really piqued my interest. When I got into schools, I got to learn how a lot of the students I work with either were using or benefiting, or maybe saw how they could benefit from assistive technology. And so when I was contracting, I would just take advantage of any training opportunities at the ISD in our county to be able to learn more about that and see what else other tools I could add to my bag to support students. And so that's kind of just how I get my foot in the door. And then when a position opened up there, they invited me to interview for it. And so I did and accepted and jumped in full time. I did go back to work full time. I was always working full time, but I went to work at the full time OT direct service in the schools for 3 years. And now do just full-time assistive technology.
So why non-traditional OT with like using assistive technology over traditional, like a traditional setting? Is there a reason why?
So that's probably, my guess is I really feel, always felt more comfortable knowing I like to know all the options. So I like to go in deep in areas, and I found it was really hard to get that really like specificity of knowledge and feel really comfortable that I'd selected the right set of tools or interventions for a student. And being able to narrow my focus a little bit, I was able to go deeper and really get some specialty and expertise. I was introduced to that a little bit in like the outpatient rehab, where we'd have our hand specialists and our shoulders, and our knee specialists and things like that. So and I was just always in awe of how good those people were. But when you're able to really, I think, narrow your focus and go in deep on an area, you do get better at it. There are just things you develop more competency with. And so that was always the struggle, I think, as a school OT or even an OT just serving a general population like, skilled nursing facility or long-term subacute care, is that you're always kind of doing the best you can, but getting clients all the time with lots of different needs. And, you're pulling from the tools that you have, but never felt like I really had the depth of knowledge to serve them as well as I could if I just knew a little bit more. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to narrow focus and go in. And assistive technology has just happened to be one of the things that that I just glommed onto as a passion. I don't know why, but I did.
So when we were doing research, we found that when using assistive technology, it's often like used, or the frame of references that are used are the compensatory and the rehabilitation approach. So we were just wondering if you find yourself actually using those approaches when
that's a good when you so when I'm talking about like all those like cobwebs to dust off, like those are things I honestly I haven't thought a lot about that I probably should. But I will say I probably use those frames of reference a lot more when I was doing more direct hands-on traditional therapy than what I do now. I find it particularly probably because I'm also serving in education that I have this this lens of a whole nother set of theories and practices that are applied specifically to education and special education that I probably think through a lot more than I do traditional OT theory, you know, different theories of or frames of reference and theories of practice. So definitely, you know, supporting independence and autonomy and all of those things, but I don't use the frames of reference a whole lot.
What type of assessments do you usually use, like most often?
Yeah, so in I will say what we do typically is we use a really dynamic assessment approach. So we don't do a lot of the students I work with have really complex. So I will say, with a variety of populations. So on one side, it would be students with learning disabilities who are struggling to access curriculum because of their learning disabilities. So whether it be, disability in the areas of writing or reading or whatever. So my role there is a little bit different. A lot of the assessment comes to us through the lens of educational assessments that they have taken. So teachers provide a lot of that data for us in terms of discrepancy between listening comprehension and independent reading comprehension or current writing abilities and things like that. I would not say I don't use really standardized assessments for those students, but other tools, assessment type tools that I use would be the written productivity profile is a tool from Denise DeCoste that looks at current challenges in the area of writing and how different assistive technology might support students in being more successful in writing. So that's one. I also will use sometimes if teachers aren't able to give me really specific data, we'll use things like a qualitative reading inventory. There's a couple different ones. So QRI is one, the Jerry Johns would be another one. So a lot of educational assessments for these students, developmental spelling inventory. So what we're really looking at is there a significant gap between the grade level content and what the student is able, where they're currently performing, and how does assistive technology help to bridge that gap or not. So that's what I do with that kind of high incidence population. On the other end of the spectrum would be our students with really complex communication and physical needs. So these are students with spinal muscular atrophy, CP, a lot of just non-differentiated diagnoses, just your childhood developmental delay that don't have, sometimes they have a really rare genetic thing, or sometimes they have no pinpointed diagnosis at all. And so for those students, we use a lot of different tools. I work together we have an AAC consultant, or augmentative and alternative communication consultant. She's a speech pathologist. So she and I work together really closely to do a dynamic assessment process to look at these kids' current skills. So again, a lot of the information will come from their direct service OT, PT, and SLP and their school team. So a lot of times they'll have receptive and expressive language scales, different OT and PT assessments that they have administered at the school level. So whether it's around visual perception or motor skills or whatever. But what we actually do is we do a lot of go in, observe the student. We'll try out some different technologies using based on the filters the team has given us about what the student's current skills are and what their needs are, and kind of watch and see how collect some data on how the student responds, tweak it from there. So we use the SET process. We probably, if you're learned about assistive technology, you're probably familiar with that. So, or the SET framework, actually developed by Joy Isabella. So you're looking at the student, the environment, the technology, and the tools, and just gather lots of information from the team and fill in any missing pieces. So some of the tools specific to that population would be things like the communication matrix. That's a tool we often will either administer ourselves or encourage the team to collect data on for those students with complex communication needs. There is, the task is another one, and it's a test of aided symbol performance, I think is what it stands for, but basically looking at students' recognition and ability to get to different symbols if we're looking at getting them on a communication device. So not a lot of standardized assessments again. One, because it's such a unique population, it's really, really challenging to do standardized assessments on those kids. And two, we just find we get better information when we use that kind of dynamic assessment process and really take a lot of information from the team and family members who know the student best, rather than trying to go in and observe in an hour and come out with recommendations. So it's quite a long process, but it seems to yield better results.
Could you give an example of a type of like technology you would use with a kid that has like a physical disability versus like a learning or like reading or writing, something like that?
Sure. So a lot of our students with higher incidence disabilities, we will use things like, we'll suggest things like text readers, word prediction. Sometimes it's things just clarify information, so different scaffolds that teachers can provide, like support for, I'm trying to think of graphic organizers, scheduling organizers to help with time management for kids with executive function delays, things like that. So a lot of standard kind of universal technology or tools that are universally available, but just not always taken advantage of in the school setting. And so it's a lot of that type of thing. For our students with complex physical and or communication needs, it could be a whole host of things. So lots of dynamic, either low tech to high tech dynamic display communication devices, eye gaze systems, switches and scanning for access to curriculum and communication. It could be adapted keyboards or other devices for students with physical impairments or visual impairments. A lot of different things. We also do look at for a lot of those students, it starts with their positioning, their ability to be stable in their positions, to have the optimal control over their body and optimal access to their devices. So a lot of times we'll start with just looking at positioning and what positioning supports can we help and solve for and put in place to make sure that they're stable first, and then work and then go from there.
So how does the assistive technology give the kids the ability to engage in occupations that are meaningful to them?
Yeah, so well, with communication, I mean, that's the huge one. That's a large focus for us, because of course that is the foundation for their ability to interact and form relationships with family members and friends and teachers. And so that's a really, really big focus for us. Other things are really key on independence. I've seen a lot of kids who have been successful in school, or people thought they were successful because they have an adult by their side who's really supporting them. And a lot of times we find peer pros are wonderful, and a lot of students, they wouldn't be able to access their education without them. But I feel the more we can get students independent of those parapros, more we can have the student really own a lot of that function and learning, the better off students are in the long run. So rather than having a student scribe to a paraprofessional and having them write it down, or we just find it benefits their learning tremendously if they're producing as much of the work themselves as possible. And so that I would say we also try and look at, maximizing opportunities for social interactions and just opportunities to be a regular kid. We've looked at things like how can we get kids more successful and integrated into a gen ed classroom. So sometimes the more technology we can have, I shouldn't say more, the better job we can do at getting them the right technology to help them be successful, the greater opportunities they have to be included in general education and be successful there, which is a huge benefit, I think, for them and for kids too.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. So you try out different technologies with different kids to see what works best for them.
Yep, absolutely. All part of that dynamic assessment. Yep.
Okay, that's awesome. So what is the most rewarding aspect of your job, and what is the most challenging?
Most rewarding aspect is probably just seeing when something works for a kid, and kids get excited about it, and you see lots of kids with disabilities so we see a lot of with our kids with low incidence disabilities, I would say. You see that a lot of learned helplessness, and they just kind of slowly fade into these passive bodies, that are, that they're able to do more, but they've gotten so used to the fact that people do it for them, or they think now they're starting to believe that they're not able to. So that I like to see when you see that light, that spark in kids, and they start to believe in themselves. And when other people start to believe in them who maybe didn't before, people all of a sudden see a kid on an IDA's device and they are amazed that they have things to say, and that they have, that they're soaking in all of this learning that's been happening, that people have just kind of been like, well, they're in the classroom, but how much are they really taking in? And when you can provide the tools to help them, feel really exciting. For students with higher incidence disabilities, so many of them are so disengaged and feeling so defeated with school by the time we get to find technology for them. That's really, so I'm kind of getting into the challenges too, but that's hard. And so when you can find something that, you have a kid who just is, again, kind of the same as those learned helplessness, they're not your physically disabled kids, but you have kids who just stop believing in themselves, don't think that they're capable, don't think they're smart, don't think that they belong in school, and we can find ways for them to demonstrate that they can do the work. It just looks, the way they get to it is a little bit differently, and they start to engage more and feel better. That's huge. And then for challenges, there's lots of challenges. And the challenges with our kids with complex needs a lot of times is just health. It's really hard. Some of them have are medically fragile and have lots of health-related challenges that are continual setbacks for them, and so trying to keep them moving forward. Other challenges would be probably team members and getting people on board. So sometimes you have these just fabulous teams that believe in kids and are all in and willing to do it, and other times you feel like it's an uphill battle to try. You're trying to change. You're not just trying to change what people are doing or the opportunities people are creating for students, but you're really trying to shift mindsets sometimes about what's possible for kids with disabilities, and that's a challenge. That can definitely be a challenge.
So do you collaborate a lot with the teachers, in the schools?
Absolutely. So we're not direct service providers. So I don't ever go in and just pull a kid from class and just work with that student myself. I should say not ever. I might have on a couple of occasions if we're looking at I'm looking at mounting issues, mounting devices on a chair or something like that. But I typically always am working with, one or more team members. So it's about gathering information from team members. It's about pulling them in and getting their ideas. It's about training them to feel more comfortable with the technology, model the technology for the student, getting things, integrated into their school day. So lots of work with team members. Yeah.
As new technology continues to emerge, is there any specific equipment that you're excited about?
I'm always excited about eye gaze because I think that I've seen the greatest growth in that, the abilities of that technology in the last 10 years. It's been pretty incredible from the first eye gaze systems that we used, and how those worked for kids with complex bodies, versus the things that are available now. And now we're getting eye gaze. There's eye gaze available for iPads. And so I think this whole mobile technology and these eye gaze and other high-tech technologies that are now combining with this technology that's really affordable for kids. So it used to be, to get an eye gaze system for a kid, you're talking $17,000. That's a big chunk of change, and it's really hard to get funded for insurance. And now we're able to get a Microsoft tablet and throw a mobile eye gaze unit on there, for about $4,000 to $5,000, and all of a sudden you've got something that's in the ballpark. And so I think it's opening up a lot of opportunities, just the way that iPads and communication apps have opened up lots of opportunities for kids with communication delays. And used to take so long for kids to get access to AAC devices because they're so expensive and big and bulky and heavy. And now things have gotten more mainstream and lighter and easier and less expensive. So that's exciting. I think one of the things I'm most excited about too is like this makers movement, and how that is going to change, 3D printing and CAD design, and how all of that is so accessible to everybody. And I'm really excited to see how that is going to change the field of assistive technologies. And over the next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll just see some really amazing things come out. I worked with, it would have been the year before last, I had a student with arthrogryposis and profoundly visually impaired, and wickedly smart second grader who just needed some access. And I knew we were doing what we could, but I thought we could do better. We had to figure out better. So I had ideas, but didn't have the ability to make it, and went to our career tech, our health sciences and our engineering department at the Career Tech Center, and said, hey, can we get some of your students together to learn about the health, students learn about this condition this girl has and some of the limitations, and come up with some ideas, and the design, the design or engineer students helped to make that become possible. And it was amazing. And now we have a biotech engineering course at our CTC, which started this school year. And I just talked to one of the course directors today, and they're up to like 37 students for next school year already that are engaged and ready to go. So I think so we set them up with different clients throughout the year that they meet with and interview, and they iterate designs based on what they need. And I think that kind of work is going to be super, super exciting.
Yeah, that's super cool. So it just sounds like the field's just going to continuously grow as like technology advances. So that's really
Definitely.
Do you find certain technology hindering success with some students, like specific technology?
There are sometimes where what we might think is the best tool for a student, or we might know in our heart of hearts, like this is the best tool. It doesn't always work well given the context, depending on the type of support that student has. So, for example, a lot of people are into a certain app on an iPad, or just the use of an iPad versus a dedicated device in general. And we might say, oh, but you know what, if they had this system, like look at, like we've done time trials, we know they could be faster in it. But the fact is, if you're not able to get the backing of the team and the family on that, it doesn't matter if you have the perfect tool. It takes the whole team agreeing on something and really behind something to get it off the ground and working. So I think you have to be cautious about that. I think you have to be cautious about the search for the perfect tool, in any way. So a lot of teams, I think, working with switches, they get stuck on, I need the perfect switch and the perfect switch site and it doesn't exist. And so we have to just get started and get kids in there and just get them lots and lots of opportunities. And it will change it and we'll shift it as that student grows. But that wait for perfection is probably one of the biggest things to overcome, or to be cautious or aware of, I think.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when using the technology, how do you motivate students, or do you have like specific strategies that you use to engage them?
One of the things that we ask when we meet with teams, so that set framework that we use and that iterative dynamic assessment process we use, one of the things that we ask about the student is their motivators and preferences. So it really is based on the context of the student. Some kids, it's food. Some kids will run away if you put food in front of them. Some kids, it's peers, it's jokes, it's sometimes it's feedback from a teacher, or just a personal connection. And so it really is based on the context and the preferences and motivators of each student. So
okay, yeah, that's cool. So are you ever like not able to get certain technology that you want for a kid based on like insurance or funding? And then if so, like how do you advocate for that?
So I will say we're really fortunate in Muskegon County that we have a pretty substantial loan library of equipment. Our local districts have been super supportive in funding a countywide loan library, so that their staff has access to check out equipment and trial it, especially AAC devices, sometimes for an extended period of time. So a year or more in some cases, to make sure that the student has success with it before we look at purchasing. There are times that we've submitted funding requests for higher end devices, eye gaze devices and things like that they've been denied. But typically, if you're persistent, they'll be denied 2 or 3 times and you resubmit. You can get them funded. You just have to be patient and persistent. In terms of things at school, sometimes we've had to land on less desirable solutions based on what the school has available for the students. So, if you might want, say that there's, this laptop and touchscreen would be the best, and they say, well, the best we can do is a touchscreen Chromebook right now because that's what's within our budget, and they have to go with that. You have to, meet them halfway somewhere. But our districts, our special ed administrators in our county have been really, really supportive. One of the things that we're starting to gain ground on and hoping to continue is getting more universal reading and writing supports available for students in our county. So like the text readers, the built-in dictionary, the translation supports for ELL students. We have some software that we've been working closely with a company to try and get the cost down. And we have some districts, about half of our districts now have taken that on district-wide. And so we hope to see that's really a trend we're continuing to push. They're really good about supporting our low incidence students. And I think they're just starting to realize the need to provide some additional supports for students with high incidence disabilities. And so that's our new fight right now. And I shouldn't say fight, our plight. How about that?
I can tell you're really passionate about the field.
Yeah, I am. I would talk forever about it, but yeah.
And And thank you for taking the time to
You bet.
let us interview you. It was
Yeah,
really informative.
absolutely. Oh, good. Good. All right. Well, thank you guys.
Yes, thank
Yep,
you.
thank
Appreciate
Stay
you.
it.
healthy.
You
You
too.
too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.